Welcome to St. Andrew United Church of Christ and to this time of our weekday reflection. Today I'll be sharing with you words from John of the Cross, a Christian mystic. Today is actually the last of our series that we've been doing on Christian mystics. The last, at least for today. I imagine that we will have more to hear from the mystics in the future. But for now, this is the last one. Next Wednesday begins Lent, and it begins with Ash Wednesday, and so that will be a service all its own that we are excited to be sharing with Butchell Park Baptist Church. So be sure to tune in next Wednesday for that Ash Wednesday service. And then in the season of Lent that follows that, we are going to be sharing with you an art series, and each week, along with a piece of art, I will share with you words that were written by the artists themselves as a way of reflection. So I'm looking forward to that and hope you will be too. Today, though, we focus our minds and our hearts on the words of John of the Cross. John's most enduring contribution to mystical understanding was called The Dark Night of the Soul. That's a reference to those times when we feel utterly abandoned by God. In fact, John often related to the scripture, my God, why have you abandoned me?" John of the Cross lived in 16th century Spain, and he was a contemporary and colleague of Teresa of Avila, one of the mystics that we highlighted a few weeks ago. Together, they tried to reform the monastic life, and John of the Cross was actually imprisoned because of it. He was a theologian, writer, and mystic, and yet is most famous for those explorations that he did of the dark night of the soul, many that came about because of his time in prison. Spiritual direction then became one of John of the Cross's major ministries. He drew on his own experiences with God, and he was quite adept at helping others recognize God's prompting in their lives. That's what a spiritual director does, even today. He was a spiritual director who helped others to discern how it is that they sense God's presence and direction in their lives. Spiritual direction in the Catholic Church has been around a very long time. Remember, John of the Cross was in the 16th century, and actually spiritual direction dates back further than John of the Cross. It dates back to the Desert Mothers and Fathers in the 3rd and 4th century. We Protestants have taken a lot longer to realize the gift of having a spiritual director, and most of us probably never even heard of it until just in the last several decades, and many of you probably haven't heard about it until just now. Many of his writings were composed for the persons that he was directing, both beginners and those who were quite advanced in the mystical life. While most of John the Cross directees were friars and nuns, he also counseled individuals who were outside the convents, even what he called public sinners. John believed that the more one loves God, the more one will want others to love God and will seek to help them through prayer and direct aid. And so, alongside his pastoral work, he taught poor children to read. He laid bricks for new convents, and he even designed an aqueduct to provide water for the monastery in Granada. John of the Cross was a mystic who will be long remembered for all that he had to teach us. Hear these words from a quote of his. "In tribulation, immediately draw near to God with confidence, and you will receive strength, enlightenment, and instruction." The prayer practice today is an opportunity to look back on a certain time period of your life, a time period that you will choose, perhaps the last 24 hours, or the last week, or the last month, or you might want to choose this whole period since we've been living with COVID. And the idea is to ask yourself questions that were questions that perhaps John of the Cross would have asked people when he was giving them spiritual direction. Questions to help you better see how God has been acting in your life, especially when you look back in hindsight. And so here are the questions for you to use today and other days. If you'd like to play the video over again and be reminded of what they are, or even jot the questions down and use them again and again as your own spiritual prayer practice. And so as you look back on the time period that you have chosen, what person or event helped remind you that God is with you? Looking back, in what ways do you now realize that God was near, but at the time, it was hard to notice? What was a highlight of this time period? In what ways might that highlight have been of God? Was I able to be grateful during this time period that I'm looking at and reflecting upon? What was a particular challenge of this past time period? Was I able to turn to God for strength and focus? And finally, what opportunities might I have missed? You can ask yourself these questions, or questions like them, every night or every week. You can have someone that you trust ask you the questions. Become a prayer partner. You could do it with someone in person, or you could do it on the phone or on FaceTime or Zoom so that you can see each other. This could become a regular prayer practice that you can literally do anytime and anywhere. A prayer practice, after all, is nothing more than something that we do with intention to help us connect to God.